I'm honored to be here to be presenting my part of my thesis, and also I would like to mention that one of the committee member is Dr. Sastra. So I think if there's any difficult question in this session, maybe I will refer to Dr. Sastra also. And also I'm glad to see my former professor from Brandeis University. Two of them are here at the moment, Professor Plummer and former Dean Petrie. So with the new and old professor in the room, I will be very try to do my best in presenting. First of all, my topic that that I study, because I'm from my background is I'm from the Ministry of Finance. So at the Ministry of Finance, we of course deal mainly with fiscal policy formulation. So I'm interested to learn how fiscal policy can impact economic performance for Thailand as well as for the ASEAN and ASEAN plus 3 countries. So this is the topic that I will be focus my study on, and I will make the presentation on my the preliminary result of my finding in my work. I think the first of all, when we start talking about the fiscal policy impact on economic growth, there are two different views on what the role of fiscal policy impact on economic growth. We have the neoclassical growth theory or the exogenous growth theory that say that fiscal policy doesn't have any impact on the growth rate of an economy, because growth is determined by capital and labor input, and growth only have the temporary effect on the fiscal policy only have the temporary effect on the growth. But then we have the endogenous growth model that predict fiscal policy will have effect. We have a long run effect on growth, and government spending and taxation will have both the temporary effect and permanent effect on the growth. So when I did my literature review, I found a paper by Professor Michael Bliney that back in 2001, he did a study testing the endogenous growth model on the fiscal policy impact on the public expenditure, taxation, and growth over the long run. And he did the study for the OECD country. He used the data from 1970 to 1995, and he found that the growth fiscal policy have a positive impact on growth. I will be presenting the conceptual framework of how he did the study in my presentation. So basically, my paper is focusing on the theoretical framework of the endogenous growth to test for the underlying factor contributing to economic growth among the ASEAN 5, China, Japan, and South Korea. And a particular focus would be given to the role of fiscal policy through public expenditure and taxation. And also, I will also include the non-fiscal variable to be examined on the growth implication. And the conceptual framework of my study, I think the pioneer work on the role of fiscal policy impact on growth was done by Professor Robert Barrow back in 1990. That in his paper, he assumed that the output, the input to he assumed there are n producer producing output y according to the production function that has as input both the private capital and publicly provided input, which eventually will be identified as the productive expenditure. So you have both input in private capital and publicly provide input, which is productive expenditure in the production function to produce output Y, output per capita. And here you have the government budget constraint that you see that in each time the variable G that you see in the production function is the productive expenditure multiplied by the N, the number of the population, plus the C. C is the government consumption, which is identified as the non-productive expenditure. So on the left-hand side is the government spending, NG is the productive expenditure, C is the consumption or non-productive expenditure, equal to L. L is the lump sum tax, which is the identified to be non-distortion tax, lump sum tax, and also the TNY, which is the distortion tax, distortionary tax. So lump sum tax, the reason that we say lump sum tax does not affect the, is considered to be non-distortionary tax because it doesn't affect the private sector incentive to invest in the input good, whereas the tax on the output, which is the NY, it distorts the behavior of both the producer and the consumer. So you have the left